Hi stars, welcome back. I'm Center Star, Center Star's channel, Chris Baird. We're on video 11 of our series about world history and history of humanity. And in case you missed my live stream 5 about intentions, my intentions with this are just presenting this to you. If you walk away with any hard feelings after this about feeling in any way slighted or lied to, I really recommend the group Spiritual First Aid Tent, I think is what it's called on Facebook. And that's for people that are awakening, that are struggling with the emotions of those feelings. And we really need to learn forgiveness on this, because this has all been fear-based. That's why it's been hidden for so long, is they're afraid that if we found out everything, we might be upset with everybody. And that's where forgiveness comes into a big play here in how we react to learning this information. And for those of you who come in, I'm not here to attack anybody's religion. I'm here to explain the religious differences in what I'm going to present today, and cultural differences in how people view these stories, okay? And what a plausible history of us is. Now, we touched on Marduk, red Kachina, in video 10, the blue Kachina, and Nibiru, okay? And here I've drawn the Earth, the Sun, and Earth again. I'll explain that in a little while. And we got religion versus Sumerian tablets, hollow Nibiru, wormwood, and then Marduk, of course. And I didn't write blue Kachina because I just drew it down here. I was running out of space. So what is the blue Kachina? I've been looking and I can't find much information on it. I have labeled it a blue neutron star, but it's a possibility that there is no star in this mini solar system. It could be just a planetary system, and this could be an Earth-like planet as well, okay? What is known about the blue Kachina? Well, recently there was this comet that was a blue comet that wasn't visible with the naked eye, and it went around the sun and it plunged into the sun. And people were saying that that was going to be the blue Kachina. Here's my argument with that. As far as we know, historically wise, Hopi Indians didn't have telescopes, okay? So when they're talking about a big blue daytime and nighttime object that you could see in the sky, they're talking about something they could see visually with their naked eye. So we haven't seen anything on this scale of a blue Kachina. Not recently anyways, but 3 times in their history, the blue Kachina would come. And around that time, the Sky Brothers, we assume to be from Nibiru, probably the Nephilim, not the Anunnaki, would come, and they would get the gold that the Hopi had stored from trading with the intercrustal city of the Ant people, which we kind of covered in video 10. And that's pretty much as far as I want to go with that. They're hypothetical. It's all hypothetical, but there are stories out there of them having traded salt with these intercrustal ant people and having survived the cataclysms that come with Marduk, aka the red Kachina, when it comes by the earth, by retreating into the ant city until all the devastation on the surface of the planet was done. And even in South America, they're finding underground caves and worshipping caves and sacrifice caves to the underground people. And this isn't hollow earth we're talking about. Hollow earth is on the other side of our crust in a hollow planet. Okay? So we'll just draw a planet really quick. We'll draw a crust all the way around. And then the center star. Okay? They would live within the crust, but not too close to the mantle where it's very hot, but warm enough to live and use fresh water, aquifer, and artificial lighting. And when you talk to flat earthers, they keep on insisting that hollow earth is a cavern type earth. Well, this is because we have movies like the recent Skull Island King Kong and the satire movie, I think it's called Nazis in the Hollow Earth. And in there, it's like a cavern, and they have the sun just sitting artificial light in the top of this cavern and lands inside of it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about polar openings in the land with rivers coming out, and here with water coming out in the North Pole, and being able to sail over and stay inside the planet. Okay? So they would trade the salt to the ant people, who would in turn trade it to the inner earth. This served two purposes. One, it kept the Hopi from knowing about inner earth, okay, inner hollow earth as much. And also, if the Hopi were just trading directly with hollow earth, they had have no reason to provide salt to the ant people. Also, there was the risk of disease, okay? Humans from the surface going into the pristine inner earth could be bringing outside diseases in and make the people sick in there. So there was a separation. Probably areas where you had to go into a room, I assume, where you would have to sit and you would have to make sure you weren't sick for a week before you entered their city as well. Nothing's written about that. I'm only assuming that, but that's the way we usually do things. We have to have a quarantine standard time before we enter certain areas, scrubbing, cleaning, and that sort of stuff to get in there. So Marduk, again, is our hypothetical destroyer of Tiamat in the 6th planetary position that held to house the Titans. Its crust was destroyed along with Tiamat's, and Tiamat's created Earth and the other inner planets and has all these Titan Mudfossils on it. Because the crust was destroyed, what we have now is kind of a reddish, broken, possibly cooled, but maybe not if it has enough radioactive materials in it, maybe glowing warm, iron mostly ball. And it's surrounded by two tail debris, okay? And oftentimes people confuse these two together, okay? But they're two separate planets in my opinion. The reason I say that is that Marduk travels kind of in between Mars and the asteroid belt area, and it dislodges the asteroids out there, but it also has asteroids flying along in front of it and behind it, and in this long tail of debris on each side following it in the gravity wake and the movement wake of the planet. Okay, but Nibiru, every time we talked about Nibiru, they had to fly past all the outer planets and the asteroid belt to get to Earth. So does it come that close to our sun? I don't know if it does or not. But if it does, possibly they can't travel on it during that time, because it also would have so much heat and stuff coming off. It would have its own tails, and leaving their world at those times when it's really close to the sun just might not be possible. We're talking about when it orbits near the sun, and just like a comet, it gets a longer tail during that time because more debris are coming off. Okay? So we're going to say that Nibiru doesn't come that close, but Marduk does. Now, this brings up something. Where are we at in our solar orbit, okay, our Earth orbit, when Marduk comes around? Are we on this side close to the debris when it comes around, or are we on this side 6 months out, on the other side of the sun? This could be factors in whether we have polar reversal or not. Because as this thing comes through, it's essentially a cooled bar magnet, a giant bar magnet. And that can pull the crust of Earth around and tug it and move the polar openings. And this could be why Earth has so many polar openings on it. And also, it may have caused the Great Flood / Sumerian Deluge. And I will cover that in a future video. So then we have Nibiru. And Nibiru is known in the Bible as wormwood. At least I have said that that's what it is. Because in their history, they had a very volcanic surface planet, and you wouldn't even be able to see the surface at all because it was covered in ash, and the ash was its protector. So if it came close to the sun, or close enough to where it would normally strip off the atmosphere, it would be protected by that ash. And when it was out in deep space, the ash acted like an insulation blanket on the planet, keeping sunlight out and keeping the heat and the atmosphere in. But what happened was the ash had started to diminish on the surface. And so they came up with these plans to King Alalu, and actually to the king before that, Lahama. And the story between King Alalu and Lama is Lama was picked off the street to be the king. His wife picked this child because she had no child, and later she asked that he become king and heir. And the king at that time could not have children because they had inbred to keep their lineage going. Originally, when they stopped war on their planet, they picked a king from the north and a queen from the south, or vice versa, to unite the clans and unite the tribes to save their planet because they were destroying each other. And that's when the first kingship was born, and that was when the first marriage was born. It was a treaty of peace. And they took as many concubines, both the society and the king, as they could, to have as many children as they could, to repopulate Nibiru. And what happened was that the law was whoever was the firstborn son would be king, and that was fine and dandy until one day the very first queen didn't have a boy until after her concubines was born. And she said, "Husband, I am your half-sister or cousin, and I think our child should be held over that concubines because she's not family at all. She's just a concubine." So they made the law of seed. And so when they got to Lama's father, he had no seed. He had lack of seed. He wasn't able to produce babies from years and years of this inbreeding through distant relationships to keep the lineage going and always keep the law of seed going in the firstborn child of the queen versus the concubine. So when it got to this king, he was getting shout-outs from that concubine's family saying, "We are the legitimate heirs. That law was bullcrap." And then he was getting people from the other side saying, "Hey, institute me. You're my uncle. You know, you should make me king." And he just said, heck with it, and he put Lama in charge. And what's interesting about that is Lama is how we get the Dalai Lama. They pick a young child and they groom them to be the spiritual leader of the people of Nepal. And now they've been ejected out and they're in India with the Dalai Lama and they're fighting to get their lands back. But Aurora challenged Lama to a match after he was mad because Lama wasn't groomed to be a king. And when they were facing these calamities, all right, their atmosphere being lost because there was no more ozone and ash to protect the surface of the planet, Lama just kind of pushed it off to the side. And that didn't sit well with Aurora and a lot of the people. So Aurora seized the moment and started wrestling him. Now, war was outlawed. If you wanted to handle something, you handled it man to man in nude combat. Nude combat. So they probably stripped off their clothes and were tussling around this castle, got up to the top of the castle, and Aurora pushed Lama off and went and sat down in his seat. "I'm king," right? But that didn't fly too well. They had to verify that. And he said, "I'm one of the concubines' firstborn sons in between since that happened, and I'm the next legitimate heir." And Anu said, "No, I'm the next king, because I am the legitimate heir through the law of seed." And so Aurora made a pact with Anu that he could be the next king as long as he waited till Aurora was done with his reign, and that he would not only make him king, but he would allow Anu to have his lineage continue by having his firstborn son marry one of his daughters. Okay? So this kind of gives you an idea of where our Olympics come from. Naked wrestling, hand-to-hand combat. Okay? So, Aurora steps in and wipes out the board, man. He's getting things done. He's going. He's tentative about this whole situation. The two leading hypotheses on how to fix this problem is, one, obtain gold. And it doesn't outline exactly what they're going to do with that gold. It takes some thinking to do with that. Some places it does, because some people have figured it out like me. But gold is needed to be sprayed in a fine, refined mist to protect Nibiru's atmosphere so that it doesn't lose heat. So they had this grand idea to send some hero astronauts to our asteroid belt right here, okay, beyond Mars, and try to fly around what I assume to be the old broken core, which would be 16 Psyche, which we went over again. Okay? And try to slow down. Well, why did they need to do that? Well, when you travel planet to planet, you speed up by using gravity, dropping in, going out, dropping in, going out, and then you slingshot to another planet, and then you use that like air brakes against the atmosphere to slow back down again. Well, 16 Psyche doesn't have an atmosphere. It might have some gravity, but it doesn't have an atmosphere to slow down around. And when they got there, all the ships were destroyed. So Alelu wasn't doing very good. And Anu was just kept keeping quiet. Because in the back of Anu's mind, he's thinking, oh, he's going to try to do this. And nobody can fix Nibiru. That's what he was thinking. So he's thinking, Alelu will do this. He'll look dumb. But let's let him go and try another thing. And if he fails, I'm going to jump on it. So, all right. So then Alelu moves on to plan number 2. And this one's really scary. Their idea is to launch weapons at the surface of Nibiru and blow the crap out of the volcanoes with weapons of great destruction or weapons of mass destruction. Kind of interesting that that's a correlation there. And these weapons were sent to the surface, and all of Nibiru stepped outside their homes, huddled and held hands. And it was probably scary as crap. And they did a countdown. And it was worldwide televised event, and had Alelu out there too, with the people, just trying to get the people to calm. And they counted down when these weapons would hit. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And boom, 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 boom. The whole world shook. Earthquakes were going off. Craters were opening. Fissures were opening. But Nibiru held fast. And people probably got up and cheered, Alelu, Alelu, because the world had held fast. But it probably silenced them down. Hey, we've got to find out if this actually worked. And unfortunately, it didn't. It created craters all over the surface of Nibiru. And that doesn't even include the environmental impact of any moisture that would go down and feed their aquifer, which was diminishing because of the loss of atmosphere every time. So they were running out of water on Nibiru. And now they had just made it that water probably to the point where any moisture that came out and would go back in the cool spots would be now irradiated. So, yeah, it wasn't such a great thing for King Alelu to not have that work. And as predicted, Anu said, enough is enough. I'm challenging you to be the king. And he was Anu's loyal cup servant, but up to this point. But he had been biding his time for his ticket and his opportunity, and he wrestled Alelu in a worldwide wrestling event, this time not around any towers where anybody could be thrown off, and Anu won. And Anu said, you're out of here. You cannot be in the capital city on Nibiru. So he was exiled. But what he didn't know was that Alelu was having secret meetings with the scientists on other hypotheses on how to fix this. And he knew about one more trick, one more that might be possible, that he could pull off alone, that he might be able to do to save Nibiru. So he got some of his loyalists to help him load a battleship, a defense craft for Nibiru, not used for war, but for defense of the planet, onto a pleasure cruiser. Okay? And the pleasure cruiser was coming from Nibiru close to the outer edges of our solar system. And he disembarked from that ship, laden with weapons of great destruction. He flew past, on solo, by himself, past all the outer planets, got to the asteroid belt, lit off one of those nukes or whatever it was, blasted a big old hole, and damaged his ship a little bit in the process, but got through the asteroid belt. And he spied Mars, and Mars, it looked okay, but not that great. So he flew on to Earth, and he slowed down, and he crash landed on Earth. And he got out of his ship, tasted the air, and indeed, it was breathable. It was manageable. And he started looking, and he found gold on the surface of Earth. Well, how did that happen? In natural planetary formation, the reason they didn't have gold on Nibiru is because when the crust expands, it's expanding with devoid of most of the metals because they trapped in the core of a planet. And when Marduk came through and ran Tiamat, it destroyed everything, and it broke apart that core, And Titan remains and precious metals fell all over the surface of the earth. Okay? So they got here and they realized, we can do this. We can do this. So he radios back to Nibiru, and Anu just can't believe himself. I mean, he's like, what has this man done? Oh my gosh. And Alu's saying, oh, I'm going to challenge you to a wrestling match. And Anu's like, I don't even know if you're on Earth, man. Seriously, I don't even know if you're making this up. So he got a scientist to figure out that Alu was indeed on Earth, and he indeed had found gold. So they started getting up these volunteer hero astronauts. They flew to Earth, and they met Alu. They repaired his ship. They mined gold, and they sent his ship back through the asteroid belt with no protection because they had hidden the weapons from Alu. That's why Anu didn't come at first. He sent one son of his and one son of Alu's to Earth to verify this. Anu did not come right away, which really displeased Alu. And so they hid the weapons from King Alu so that when Anu came, he couldn't use that to kill the king, essentially, and cheat his way into the role of king again. So they came, and they were getting Earth sick. They were getting Earth sick, people, because they were under an external sun. Remember, the inside sun is just light radiation, just more like a radiant lamp. Not a heavy nuclear furnace like out here. And man, 24-hour days and nights, 24-hour days and nights, 24-hour days and nights. It was making them Earth sick. The moon in the night terrified them. And that messed with their bodies too, and their skin was falling off. They were not doing good on the face of Earth. They radioed for more people, for women, for medical treatment. And all of these people came. In the meantime, Anu finally did come. And Anu challenged Anu. Especially because Anu had taken it upon himself to make his own son the ruler of Earth, and made Alu's son the ruler of Mars. And that really made Alu mad. I came all the way here, I found Earth, and you're giving him the S end of the stick. So they wrestled, and at the conclusion, Alu lost. And in his anger, because they wrestled naked, he reached up, and I'm sorry to say this is a little bit rated R for this channel, but he bit his manhood off. We'll leave it at that. He bit his manhood off, and he swallowed it. And Anu cried out in pain and banished him to Mars with a ship and just a little bit of supplies, where he became bones. He went there and he corroded down to bones. And when Anu forgave him and later sent a team to Mars to try to revive him, to actually resurrect him, because they had that ability, they couldn't, because all he was bones. There was no flesh left. There was nothing to resurrect. So they built a monument on Mars after Alu. Now, after that, King Anu said, these are my heroes. And he named them the Anunnaki. The hero astronauts of Nibiru that went to Earth were named the Anunnaki. Okay? And those that later went to Mars were named the Igigi. And that's where I want to leave it off today. Because when we start talking about this and we get into religion versus Sumerian tablets, religion tells us that the Nephilim were God's kind. Alright? And God threw some of his angels down to Earth because they were bad people and they were banished to Earth. Okay? But that's not the case according to the Sumerian tablets. The Sumerian tablets tell us that those Anunnaki that came to Earth, they were hero astronauts sent for the salvation of the world. And they couldn't go back to Nibiru because, like we talked about with the Hopi being separated from the hollow Earth, these people were Earth sick. Their DNA was messed up from being underneath the outside sun. Okay? They were having cancers. They were having issues. They couldn't go back to Nibiru. They couldn't go back home. It was a one-way ticket. They were very brave men and people for their planning to come to Earth to do this. Alright? So, that doesn't leave you with too much thought about what happened next when they're getting sick and they're having a hard time doing all this work. What do you think happened next? I'm going to leave you with that question before we come into this next week. What do you think the Anunnaki did to solve their labor force situation? Have a good week. subscribe, click the bell notification button, and as always, peace.